All right, welcome to lesson 3.7 on how to solve percent problems. In this lesson, we are going to learn how to solve percent problems in a couple different ways, as well as how to solve percent of change problems. All right, so our first way of solving a percent problem is to use a proportion. In this case, you can set up a proportion as A is to B equals the percent over 100, okay? Where A is the part and B is the whole. So let's do an example with this. So we are given the problem, what percent of 25 is 17? So I am going to set up my proportion. I'm going to say that my part is 17. So I'm going to go 17 over my whole, which is 25. Now I know that 17 is my part because it says what percent of 25, meaning that 25 is the whole, and you're finding the part of it, which is 17. So we're finding the percent. We don't know what the percent is, so we're going to go x over 100. So then I'm going to cross multiply. So I'm going to have 25x equals 17 times 100, which is 1,700. I am going to divide by 25. Divide by 25. And so x, or my percent, is going to be 68. So what percent of 25 is 17? It's 68%. All right, easy enough. All right, let's look at another problem. So in this case, it says, what number is 30% of 90? So we want to know what our part is. We're trying to figure out the part since we're trying to figure out what number is 30%. So I don't know my part, so I'm going to go x over my whole is 90. And then I know the percent, so I'm going to say 30% over 100. It's always over 100. Cross multiply again, so I've got 100x equals 90 times 30, which is 2,700. Divide by 100. Divide by 100. And the part in this case is 27. Okay, so my answer would be 27. All right, so that's how you solve it using a proportion. The second way you can solve it is by using an equation. So there are three different types of percent problems. One where you're finding the percent, one when you're finding the whole, and one when you're finding the part. So in this case, instead of just using the proportion where we're just plugging in that information, we can also use an equation. So I'm going to show you how that works here. So the first time is when you're trying to find the amount, the result of taking the percent. For example, what is 25% of 60? There's some very important words here. Is and of. Is always equals, is an equals sign, and of always means multiply. So in this case, we can just literally translate the question into an equation. So what, A or X or whatever, is equals 25%. I'm going to convert it to a decimal, so 0.25 of times 60. Okay, and then we would solve from there. So we would just do 0.25 times 60, it would get us our part. All right, the second type of problem is when you're trying to find the base or the number you are taking the percent of, or we also can call it the whole. Okay, so another one, 15 is 25% of what number? Same sort of idea, so 15 equals 0.25 times a number, b. So in this case, in order to solve this, I would have to divide 15 by 0.25 in order to find b. All right, the last type of percent problem is when you are finding the percent number, so the percent itself. So in this case, we would say 15 is what percent of 60? So we would do 15 equals p times 60. The one thing you want to remember with this is it is going to give you your answer in decimal form, so you are going to have to convert it to a percent. All right, so let's look at some examples with this. So I have what percent of 36 is 51? So I'm going to have my percent of, so multiply, 136 is equals 51. So if I were to rewrite this to look a little bit nicer and more algebraically correct, we could write it as 136p equals 51. So then I would divide by 136, sorry. And then I would do 51 divided by 136, which would be 0.375. And remember how I said that you needed to convert this into a percent, so we're going to move it over twice. And so my answer would be 37.5%. And that would be my answer. All right, let's look at one more example of doing it the equation way. What number is 15% of 88? So I'm going to do just x is equals 15%. I'm going to turn it into a decimal, so 0.15 of, so times 88. So then I'm just going to multiply 88 times 0.15. And that is going to get me 13.2. So my answer, what number is 15% of 88? It's 13.2. All right, so let's compare how this works between doing the proportion way and the equation way. So let's say we are given this question, 20 is 12.5% of what number? So if I were to do this the proportion way, I would say I have, I'm trying to find, in this case, my whole. So I'm going to go 20 over x, and then I'm going to do 12.5 over 100. All right, cross multiply, I've got 12.5 x, oops, sorry, my point looks more like a multiplication sign, equals 20 times 100, so 2,000. Divide by 12.5, and I should get 160. All right, if I were to do it the equation way, so same problem, just doing it in a different format. So I'm going to say 20 is, so equals 12.5%, so I'm going to convert that to a decimal, so 0.125 of, so multiply some number. Same thing, divide by 0.125, divide by 0.125, and 20 divided by 0.125 is again 160. So you're going to get the same answer. I am not going to require you to do one way or another. I do want to show you both ways, so the proportion way and the equation way, and let you decide which one is easier for you. Sometimes it just depends on the question as well. Okay, so the last part of our lesson today is just talking about percent of change, which I know we talked about in pre-algebra, but I just wanted to go over it again. So the percent of change is a ratio that compares the change in a quantity to the original amount. So this is when you are marking up prices, or if you are like discounting prices, like at a grocery store or at a mall, whatever. So if you were, in order to solve these, we would just do the amount of change. So you just subtract the original and the new amount, and you divide it by the original amount. You always divide it by the original amount. Okay, and there are two different types of percent of change. There's a percent of increase and a percent of decrease. You solve them the same way, you just have to decide, you just have to say whether it's an increase or a decrease. So let's see how that works. So in this case it says, identify the percent of change as an increase or a decrease, then find the percent of change. My original amount is 140, my new amount is 189. Since my price or my number is going up, I know right away that it is a percent of increase. Okay, now I'm going to solve it the same way it showed me here. I'm going to take my final amount and I'm going to subtract it by my original amount. I'm going to do 189 minus 140. And I'm going to divide that by my original amount, which in this case is 140. So 189 minus 40 is 49. Divided by 140. Plug that into the calculator. And that would get you 0.35. So I know that my percent of increase in this case is going to be 35%. And I always just do an up arrow if it's increase, a down arrow if it's a decrease. All right, last problem that we're going to do, our last idea we're going to do is, if you know the original amount and the percent of change, you can actually find the new amount. So I have the equations right here. So for a percent increase, you multiply the original amount by 100% plus whatever the increase amount is. For a decrease, you multiply the original amount, but instead of adding the percent to 100%, you're going to subtract. So let's see how this works with a word problem. So it says find the sale, that's supposed to say price, of a pair of jeans that originally cost 40% and is being discounted by, I'm sorry, hold on. That makes more sense. That originally cost $48 and is being discounted by 40%. So I'm going to plug that information into this. It's being discounted. So I know immediately that it's a decrease. Okay. So I'm going to plug it into this bottom equation. So I'm going to do my $48 and I'm going to multiply that by 100%. And in this case, since it's a decrease, minus 40. Okay. Percent wise. So then that's going to become 48 times, and I'm just going to convert. I know 100 times, or minus 40 is 60. That's 60%, so I'm going to convert that to a decimal, so 0.6. So I'm going to do 48 times 0.6, and that's going to equal 28.8. So in this case, since I'm talking about money, I'm going to say 28.80. Throw a dollar sign in front of that. So the sale price of a pair of jeans is going to be $28.80. All right, so that's all I have for you on percent solving percent problems. Let me know if you have any questions. Thanks.